Hi there, Craig Harmon of Harmony Music Education. I want to talk to you today about whether or not you should buy a piano or a keyboard for your child to learn on. But before I do, I want to have you go down and hit that subscribe button so that way you are notified when I release a new video, as well as hitting that like button so that other people can see it as well. All right, so piano or keyboard, what's the difference? Why do I get this question all the time from parents? Because they aren't really sure. And they say, "Well, what should we get? Do we get a keyboard? Do we get a piano?" And my answer is yes. I know that sounds kind of silly, right? But my answer is whatever best fits your need and what you have available. Because for many families, there's a family piano. If you look right over my shoulder here, that's my piano. I use it to teach my lessons from. It was my grandmother's piano. And so when I started taking lessons, I was in kindergarten and we didn't have a piano. My dad was a pastor, and so we lived literally next door to the church. And so from kindergarten through third grade, I went and practiced on the piano at church. And in third grade, my grandparents noticed that, okay, I think you're actually really serious about this. And so they gifted me the piano, and it's been mine ever since. Um, Not every family has that, and that's okay. But I want to talk today a little bit about the differences between the piano and the keyboard. Obviously, there's a lot of significant physical differences. I'm going to touch on that a little bit, but also the practical realities that you face with an instrument. So, first off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the piano. Obviously, the piano takes up a whole lot of space. It's heavy. I mean, you basically have a whole wall, or at least half a wall, taken up by the piano. And it requires maintenance. It requires yearly tuning to make sure that it's in good condition so it's usable, so that it doesn't get other issues down the road. And what happens, even if you buy a used piano, let's say, and you don't know how well it's been taken care of beforehand, you don't really exactly know what shape it's in. I mean, you can have a technician take a look at it and give you some feedback, but you don't really know how well taken care of it was. So even if you get it for free or for cheap, you're still going to have to put in some work because you have to get it moved to your place. You have to get it tuned once you do that, and then keep up with it. But then what happens if your son or daughter decide they don't want to play the piano anymore? Well, now you're stuck with this big half a wall that isn't really designed to be a bookcase. It isn't really designed to do anything other than take up a whole lot of space. So now you're stuck. And pianos are difficult to get rid of. So a keyboard can be a little bit of a better option because number one, it's portable, right? I mean, you can take it, fold up the stand for it, put it in a closet, so it doesn't take up a whole lot of space. You can put it away when you're not using it. The other thing about it is it makes different sounds, which for younger students is definitely a plus, and even some older students too. But the piano is just going to make the piano sound. A keyboard, well, you can make it make some drum sounds. You can make it do some sound effects. You can do different kinds of pianos. You could do strings. You could do all different kinds of things, which is a really fun exploration tool sonically. The other thing about this with the keyboard is that you can plug in headphones. Now, I will tell you, I had the piano for the longest time, obviously, but I went out and purchased a keyboard after my oldest daughter was born because, well, babies need sleep. And I learned this the hard way when my daughter was about 5 months old. Not that I was playing music, actually. I grew up in Wisconsin and I love the Packers. So I was watching the first game of the year. It was the Packers and the Bears. The Packers scored a touchdown and I let out my celebratory yell of touchdown and woke the baby. Needless to say, for a little bit of the game, I was putting her back to sleep. But I learned the lesson that it's probably not a good idea to be very loud when the baby's asleep. And it doesn't matter if you have a baby in the house or not, having that keyboard, having the ability to plug in headphones, is a huge help, because there may be times where you've got other things going on. Maybe your other child's working on something. Or maybe, since if you're working from home, you may have a meeting or something online. The child can be practicing while you're in your meeting or doing whatever else you need to do. This is a positive thing. The other thing about a keyboard is if you want to get rid of it, it's a whole lot easier and less burdensome than a piano. Obviously, the piano and the keyboard do two different things. Very similar, but different. The big difference really is that the piano is going to have that natural resistance to pressing down on the keys. And that can't be duplicated with a keyboard. Well, actually it can. You just have to pay a lot of money for it, which is really out of most people's price range. So it's replicated kind of on keyboards nowadays, but it's definitely not exact. So when you're looking for that weighted resistance on your keyboard, that's what you want to go for. But the only other main difference between a piano and a keyboard is that pianos usually have 2 or 3 pedals, and you can get a sustain or damper pedal for your keyboard, but that's pretty much it. Now, here's the reality. If you're just starting out on the piano, you're maybe going to use the damper pedal, the sustain pedal, the one that's all the way on the right. That's the one that you're going to use pretty much out of those 3 most of the time. The other 2 are cool and they do some great techniques, but they're not really used that much. So they're not really the most necessary, but as the student advances, maybe that is something that's a need down the road. You can always go from the keyboard to the piano. That does work too. Even if you are one of those families that I talked about earlier that has a family piano and your child loves to practice, especially as they get older, it may not be a bad idea to invest in a very basic keyboard, because that way, again, they can plug in headphones. They can practice it to their heart's content without disturbing anybody else. So there's that. The other thing overall to think about is, what's your living situation? I know that's kind of personal and kind of strange, but the reason why I didn't have my piano with me when I graduated from college, well, because I was at college, my parents had it. Then they moved it to Texas with them from Wisconsin. Because, well, just out of college, I'm not going to live in a house. I lived in an apartment on the 2nd floor, where it's pretty much not a great idea to be moving a piano around, and not to mention that it's going to bother the neighbors. So a keyboard, if you're living in that kind of setup, is going to be a whole lot better. If you're living in a house, well, then you can definitely, makes it a whole lot easier to have a piano. So that's another thing to take into consideration, is what is the physical space? So those are some different things to think about as you're wrestling with the whole idea of piano versus keyboard. Do you have to get all 88 keys on your keyboard? Well, a full-size piano is 88 keys. Keyboards will cut them off at about 76, and then down from there. It's basically just cutting off the higher end and the lower end. When you're starting out, they're not the most essential. It is helpful to have all 88, just because that way it makes it fun again and really experiment around and try the different sounds and see what those really high sounds sound like and what those really low sounds sound like. That can be kind of a helpful thing, but you don't have to. The 2 main keyboard brands that I recommend that are best value in my opinion would be Yamaha. Yamaha instruments overall are good, middle of the road, not the best of the best, but definitely not the cheapest, most basic things out there. The other instrument that I recommend, which is what actually my keyboard is that I'm sitting right here at, is a Casio. I really, really love this keyboard. The model number, it's Casio, and I forget what it is. That's okay. I'll link it in the notes of this video. But those are great basic models to look at and basic brands to look at. You don't have to spend $1,000 on a keyboard unless you want to. If you got the money, great. that's fantastic. You're going to get a really good instrument. But even just a couple $100 is going to buy you exactly what you need to start your child off with and have it last them for 3, 4, 5 even years or longer. So that's what we're talking about if we're thinking about piano versus keyboard. What do you have? What do you use? What's the best for you? Like I said before, it kind of depends on what your setup is and what's easiest. If you have the space for it, definitely use the piano. If you don't, that's okay. But it works either way because the whole idea is learning the skill and learning to have fun in doing it. And you can have fun playing on the piano just as much as you can have fun playing on the keyboard. I've done it on both, and I find fun in both parts of it. So thanks for tuning into this video. If you would, again, hit that subscribe button and also hit that like button. Thanks for watching.